he had about 50 boys at that time who he fed, and they went to the local school. He was kind of like a headmaster in a way, but not in the usual kind of way. And he was really loved to feed people. And so when the children were being fed, he fed the children who were actually at the ashram itself, which was about 50 of them, and they were poor kids. And also he fed the children from the village. Anyone who wanted to come could come. So he was into feeding people big time. That was a puja. This word puja means worship. That was his worship in a way. He worshipped other people. He worshipped children. He worshipped the Divine Mother in children. And even in adults. Like me. So this went on for I was there about a year and a half, something like that. And I want to sort of fast forward a little bit, because I've been talking quite a long time already. In a nutshell, what happened was, I could talk for hours, actually. And I'm not going to do that, because it's certainly not what you guys need, and it's not what I need. But anyway, fast forward to 1977, my sister came out, and she came out from England, and she was really worried about me. She thought I had been abducted by this guru in this strange place called Saptashring. So she came out, and she actually stayed for a year with Babaji. She became a disciple of his. So in 1977, I went back to England. And in fact, I ended up in Baba Muktananda's ashram, and really started to enjoy the comforts of being a Westerner again. The food, the green fields, it was, in a way, such a relief to be back in familiar territory. My parents were there, my mother was cooking me great meals, all this stuff. And in 1979, I got a letter from Dean saying, if you want to see Baba Prakashananda, you need to come fast, because he's not well. I got on the next plane and I went back to India. And it really needed that letter from Dean for me to go back. And in a nutshell, what happened was that Babaji was not well. He was in seriously bad health. He had diabetes, he had a heart condition. He actually had decided he was going to leave Saptashring. By this time he was 60s, he was in his 60s, and he was going to go and live in Nasik. And Nasik is about 2 hours from Saptashring. And he left after something like 30 years in Saptashring. He left to go down to Nasik. And he stayed in a little bungalow in Nasik, which belonged to one of his devotees. And this devotee had made half of this bungalow for him, and half of it they lived in themselves. And that's where he lived from 1979 through till 1983. So the way I came to spend probably the most important time of my life with Prakashananda on a very close level happened something like this. On Guru Purnima Day, which is the day which is sacred to the Guru, I thought I must go and see Prakashananda. I must go and see him. I really had the pull to go and see him. So I went down from Saptashring Mountain to the 2-hour walk down, got the bus, went to Nasik, and went to his bungalow. And Guru Purnima is a magical day in the Indian culture because the disciples traditionally come and they visit their guru, and they bring coconuts, they bring flowers, and all his devotees came from all over the place, from Bombay, they were coming the whole day, and I suppose over the day, probably 100, 200 people turning up. And I spontaneously helped in the logistics of all these people coming to this tiny little room. This bungalow was not like your Australian bungalow, it was a tiny little place. Tiny little room, maybe, I don't know, 12 by 12, something like that. And he had his little room, he had a bedroom, and there was a small kitchen, and that was it. And I spontaneously, I thought, I've got to help. It's obviously I've got to help, there's no question about it. So I started to help in any way I saw fit, because he didn't speak English. And at the end of the day, at the end of Guru Purnima day, and it had been a magical, beautiful day, with that same devotion just so manifest, so beautifully manifest, I started to get ready to go back to Saptashring. And he said, "Where are you going?" "Where are you going?" He said, "I'm going back to Saptashring." I said, "You don't have to go. You can stay here if you like." So that simple sentence actually changed my life. And I spent the next 3.5 years with him in that bungalow. And he would go off a lot. I mean, he would go traveling off to Bombay, and he'd go here, he'd go there. But basically, I was with him in very close proximity for up until 83, from 1980 through to 1983. And one of the first things that happened when I started to be his attendant, because that's what it was, I was very much into meditation at that time. I thought, this is what you do, you meditate. This is the way to get liberated. The Indians have this whole idea of liberation, which nobody quite knows what that means, but it's talked about, liberation. In fact, Babaji said, just talking about liberation, he said, you don't want to be liberated. You don't want that. You actually want to be less than liberated, so you can taste the sweetness of the divine. If you actually get liberated, if you become one with the divine, you're gone. You want to have a little bit of distance. Interesting. So, I was into this meditation, and I was sitting there just a few days after I'd arrived, and I was doing my meditation. I was having a few kriyas and feeling very pleased with myself. Oh, look, I'm having these kriyas in front of my guru, aren't I wonderful? He came out, he sat down, and after a while, I stopped and I opened my eyes, and there he was, and he said, look, when you do my seva means when you do my work, that's what you do. You don't meditate. And it completely blew my concepts. I thought, I don't meditate, but I thought it was all about meditation. He said, no, you don't do any of that stuff. You just be here with me, with absolute one-pointed concentration, through thick and through thin, through the heat, through the cold. You just do my seva, and that's all you have to do. And basically what it was an invitation to enter into his world, into his consciousness. And I became part of what went on in that little room, which was these extraordinary meetings, which would happen every day. He was open 7 days a week. And he really made himself available. In a way, he hadn't been available up in Saptashring. Not in that same kind of way. And people used to come like bees to honey, because he was full of the Shakti. he used to say, the Shakti Dam is here and the Mukti Dam is over there. The Mukti Dam was this building just next door. So this tiny little room he called the Shakti Dam. And why? Because the Shakti was very strong in its place, and people would come and they would get darshan in whatever form they needed to get it. And Westerners came occasionally, Indians, lots of Indians would come, and he would tell stories, and sometimes he would say, go and make tea for such and such a person, do this, do that. Sometimes he'd complain about me to his devotees and say, why has God given me this fool of an Englishman? I don't even speak his language. And they'd all look at me. And really, the work that was getting done, he was just working on all the ideas that I had in my mind about sadhana, about everything. And I was just getting more and more simple. I was just in his consciousness more and more. And being in Prakashana's consciousness there was nowhere else I really wanted to be. It was not easy, but it was extraordinary. And one of the extraordinary things that happened around Prakashananda was you started to wake up to the fact of who you were. Who you were. Who am I, really? Am I this Englishman who's been to public school and da-da-da-da-da-da-da? Or who actually am I? I mean, this is the big question. This is the biggie that everybody wants to know. Who I really am I? Who am I? And it's not something that it doesn't have an answer. There's a revelation, there's a realization, but it doesn't come from the mind at all. So Prakashananda would basically, my thinking process became less and less, and more I found myself operating from where he was, which is the state of love. He was in the state of love. It was also like being around a fire. He was a fire. It was not easy being around Prakashananda. It was not easy, but it was completely extraordinary as well. And there were these glimpses into who I am. And who I am is who you are. It's not two different things. So I was kind of every man. I was every man. And what was being revealed was the knowledge. 5 minutes more. And what was being revealed was the million dollar question. And it was revealed just by being in his company. And the mind, I started to see the mind as being merely a mind. I was identified completely with my mind and ego. I thought that's what I was. And I started to see that I'm actually, this ego and this mind is merely a bunch of thoughts. It's merely a bunch of ideas. That's all it is. And I swore that I would never again be duped by the mind. When I got back to the West sometime later, I got sucked right back in to the mind. And I realized the mind is not so easy to get out of the tentacles of the mind. Dee just told me I've got 5 more minutes. I guess one thing I want to say is that in my case, after being with Babaji in that kind of way, one time he came up to me and had 2 pieces of cloth, one white and one orange. The orange represented a renunciation, and the white represented the householder. That's how I saw it. And he came up to me, it was late at night, he came up to me with these 2 pieces of cloth, one in each hand. And I felt this is very, very important, what I decide to do here. And I took the white cloth, meaning the white cloth of the householder. And because I knew I was not a sannyasi, and you don't have to be a sannyasi. You can do the sadhana in the world. It's possible to do that. You don't have to be a sannyasi. But I needed to be back in the world. I needed to be in the world. And the world has actually taught me a lot. And if I'd been a sannyasi, no. So here we all are. We're all in the world. But we do have the choice to do sadhana, to make ourselves available for this darshan, to make ourselves available to meet the Guru. Who is the Guru? The Guru is in the heart. So I've run out of time. I actually had a whole lot more to say, but it's not going to happen. So my apologies about rambling on in ways I shouldn't have done. But I hope you've got something from this. So.
Just, okay. Just got, is anyone got any question? Any question? Any question you want to ask? Yeah. Any question? Yes. Yes, sorry.
Just off the top of my head, just mentioned there that the mantra led you down the wrong path.
Say again?
So you said the mantra led you down the wrong path when you were in Indonesia.
Oh, not the mantra. No. Well, it was the practices I was doing. It was, Yeah, it was the practices I was doing. I was with a teacher who was... Can you hear? The teacher I was with was not a Sadguru, not a true guru. He was someone who had his own agendas. Yeah. So it was quite a dangerous path, and I was lucky to get out of there in one piece.
Can I ask a question?
Mine's not actually a question, but it throws some light on Prakashananda's personality. I met him in 1982 in Ganeshpuri, and he was giving darshan, and I slipped in and sat down, and he was asking people for questions, so I put my hand up. And I said, Babaji, can you please tell me what the face of God looks like? And please don't tell me you can't describe it like everybody else says. And he looked at me and he said, with a big smile on his face, and he said, don't worry, you're going to see God's face very soon. Yes.
Thank you. So you're one of the, what did we ask people before, didn't we, how many people that actually met Prakashananda? And I think it was only, can I ask again, how many people have met Prakashananda?
There was another block here, but he's...
Sorry, who's it?
He left it.
Right, okay, yes, Chris, yeah. So the three people here who have met Babaji.
He was very sweet.
Yeah, yes, yeah. He could be very non-sweet too.
That's only good.
Thank you. Yes.
I was interested in what was difficult about being with him, because I got this impression of this sweetness and this love. And what was difficult about being with him?
Because he was working on the ego of the people around him. And he did that, that was his role as the guru. So, you had the feeling of being fried in oil. And it was no joke. It was really no joke. And he knew how to just turn up the heat so you actually felt like you were being burnt up from inside. So There was nothing romantic about being with him. It was very much about a surrender and the burning up of the ego. Yeah.
There's one more question.
Oh, I can ask it.
Come on, John.
Oh, I was just going to ask a little extension to that. When you said it was like a burning up, was that a physical feeling, or was it just like an uncomfortable?
It felt like a physical feeling, yeah. It felt like your mind was on fire. Sometimes it was. I mean, I remember once I had this incredible pain in this center here, and I felt that it was what they call the piercing of the chakra here, and it was agonizing. I mean, that was like a physical pain. So that being around Prakashananda, there was an internal process that went on, a purification that went on. And sadhana that's what it is, the purification. Because the self is already realized. The self is realized. We don't realize the self. But what has to happen is that the mind and the heart are purified, and that's what sadhana is. That was my understanding.
Considering that one needs to have a relationship with his guru, current status of sadhus and gurus as is, who does one go to see to get diksha? Where do we find the true guru now?
It's a good question, isn't it? I mean, they say when the disciple is ready, the guru appears. And I guess it's a good question. I guess you have to keep your eyes and ears open. And you know, I like this expression of, I think you need to be on the bus. On the bus means, you know, your intention is that when the grace of God comes, you're kind of ready for it. You're kind of pointing in the right direction. And then it can happen. So all you can do really is you can be on the bus. That's kind of how I see it, really.
Pretty much trusting the grace of God.
That's right. Which is inside.
It's a bit like saying you've already bought your ticket.
You've already
Bought your ticket.
bought your ticket.
It's good.
The guru can come in many forms, and diksha can come in many forms. And it doesn't just look like a Hindu man in an orange robe.
Absolutely.
I remember the first time you mentioned your love for Christ, and that was very moving for me. I'd love you to say a little bit about that, but I know you have to finish,
When I went to the West, I had a meeting with Christ, you might say. I went to 2 monasteries in England. One was Franciscan and one was an Anglican forest monastery. And I had this meeting with Christ. And I had a sense of his cosmic sacrifice. And I saw it from the point of view of what I'd been given by Babaji, which is quite different from really what a lot of Christians, how they see it. But what I saw was this extraordinary divine love, and I saw the cosmic sacrifice, that he'd voluntarily laid his life down for his devotees, and that by surrender to Christ, he picks you out of this world. So when at the point of death, you get taken out of the wheel. That was my understanding. And the Guru, I mean, yeah, it's a mystery, obviously. Of course it is. We don't know what happens when we die. But, you know, if you're with a Guru and you really are serious, you really want to go back home, then I think, you know, the Guru helps, or God helps at death. Because that's the really important moment, is when we die. And we're all in the same boat on that one.
All right, thank you. Let's, I say it's a sort of a little bit, a little bit gross to be clapping our hands after, you know, so the things of a much more subtle perspective. But let's put our hands together really loudly.
Well, thank you, everybody, for coming.